Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Game Changer. I'm Mariam Zia. In today's program, we will be talking about three important issues. Of course, in the first segment of the program, we will be talking about the recently passed resolutions that were presented by Pakistan at UNGA. A key committee of the United Nations General Assembly passed four resolutions that were presented by Pakistan, and these resolutions were aimed towards the disarmament in the region and sub-regional countries. These resolutions dealt with regional disarmament, conventional arms control, and confidence building measures. These three resolutions were passed by consensus at UNGA committee, and a fourth resolution that was aimed at the conventional arms control at regional and sub-regional levels. It received 182 votes, and India was the only country that voted against this important resolution. In today's program, we will be talking about the significance of these important resolutions for the region, as we know that the world is grappling with Ukraine war as well as the asymmetrical warfare in Gaza. So what is the significance of these resolutions, and what would be we doing going ahead in implementation of these resolutions? We'll be talking in today's program. Of course, later in the program, we will also be talking about the upcoming COP28. Of course, we will be discussing about Pakistan's agenda and what needs to be done when we talk about loss and damage fund at COP22. And in the third segment of the program, we will be touching upon the recent situation in Israel-Palestine war and what the future holds for the region. To discuss this and more, we are joined in the studios by Mr. Shahriyar Khan, who is expert in international affairs. Welcome to the program. We are also joined by Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, who is expert in international affairs. Welcome to the program. So, Dr. Jaspal, let me start with you. Of course, these resolutions are very significant. Can you tell us about the significance of these four resolutions and how are they going to be impacting the regional security?
I think that the way these resolutions have been approved by the United Nations Security First Committee, they make sense. But the first resolution is nuclear disarmament, arms control, nuclear arms control, and conventional arms control. At the same time, confidence of building measures between or among the state at the regional, sub-regional levels. The primary focus of this resolution is to cut the military spending, decrease or control the arms race, and at the same time save the world from nuclear Armageddon. Unfortunately, when these resolutions were passed, two things we have to not forget. Though Pakistan supported them and Pakistan was advocated and sponsor state, but this nuclear disarmament is just a wishful thinking, because all the nuclear weapon states have been increasing their nuclear arsenal with the modernized nuclear weapons, including United States, you can say Russia, Federation, and China. And within our region, India has been investing a lot and dragging Pakistan in the nuclear arms race. Interestingly, on the conventional arms control, India is the only state which opposed it.
Yes, and what was the rationale of India to oppose
The rationale
this?
is very important, because India has been modernizing its conventional armed forces. It is transforming its typical traditional core setting to the integrated command system. And it is one of the you can say, biggest buyer of the conventional arms, like Su-12, you can say missiles from the Su-4, missiles from the what you call it, from Russia, missile defense, surface to air missile defense system. It has also purchased aircraft from the France. It is also purchasing the United States, and it has been declared by the United States as one of the biggest defense partners. It has been purchasing similar missiles, defense systems from Israel, and 3 squadron S-400 missiles will be reaching to India. So India is at the moment one of the biggest buyer of the conventional arms from the technologically advanced nations. That's the reason that you find that India is very attractive for these armament produced industries, and that's the rationale that if India vote in favor of the conventional arms control, then it becomes moral binding for India to avoid these purchases, and India is one of the state which is increasing its conventional arsenal plus nuclear.
India is increasing its arms position and arsenal, of course. And how do you see the current balance of power being impacted by these resolutions?
So, Mariam, this resolution definitely talks about the balance in conventional capabilities of states within South Asia. And it also points towards Pakistan's responsible role in taking forward the agenda of international peace and regional security. So, as Dr. Jaspal has said, India has very recently started buying a lot of sophisticated weapons as well, and conventional weapons that is disturbing the balance of power or defense capabilities in the region. And Pakistan is more advocating towards building more confidence building measures and develop mechanisms in which regional tensions can be dissipated, and conventional weapons and the requirement of defense technology goes into the back burner. As we know, and as you also mentioned in your introduction, that COP28 is approaching, and the world is focusing more on sustainable renewable energy and to mitigate risks that are coming from climate change. Now is not the time when regional countries go into this race of developing their own conventional weapons capability and not focusing on issues that are much more important in the regional aspect.
Right, and in practicality, Dr. Jaspal, how do you think that these resolutions are going to be helping to reduce the arms race in the region?
In reality, there is only one resolution which makes a sense, that's the confidence building measures between at the regional and sub-regional level, because without confidence building measures you cannot move ahead.
Right, and can you tell us about the existing framework of CBMs or confidence building measures?
Yeah, because if you see that between India and Pakistan, if we can take at the regional level, Pakistan and India has two very important confidence building measures agreements like non-attack on each other's nuclear installations. Despite the conflict, despite the military deployments in 2002, 2001, 2002 and again in the post-Pulwama, on every 1st January we exchange these lists between we share with them and they share with us our nuclear installation, and that is non-attack on each other nuclear installations. Similarly, prior notification of ballistic missile testing, and that is also we have honoring, both states have been honoring these kind of things. Because generally we have seen the confidence building measures leads towards some kind of opening up the space and talk and discussion, and that leads to the arms control or the confidence building. But at the moment when we see practically, as you have already identified, if this nuclear disarmament at the agenda, it has been it is always, or it has been always you can say core item of the conference of disarmament in Geneva. Every state supports it, but practically no one was working, and the trend is not in favor of the nuclear disarmament. Why? If you see that recently report was released that the Americans are planning to test at the Nevada to test, and the scientists are working how to improve that quality. Similarly, we have seen that the Russian Duma by consensus ordered their government or asked their government that you must, you can say, move out of and make null and void of your what you call it ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So if we can focus on the Russians and the Americans, and the Chinese have been also increasing, India and Pakistan are increasing, if we can focus on these states nuclear programs and the trends, the way they are following, my understanding is that nuclear disarmament is not possible. Now the second point is nuclear arms control. In that context, the trend has been negative since 2002 when United States exited from the anti-ballistic missile treaty of 1972, anti-ballistic missile treaty from in 2002. So that the trend is negative from that time. Then we have seen that Americans have exited from the 1987 international what we call it INF treaty, Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019, and last year Russia suspended its membership to the New START treaty, that is bilateral between the Russians and the Americans.
Right.
So these three things, if you put together, we find that today arms control is out of fashion, or there is no possibility. Now coming towards the arms control and conventional
Right. Let's take the opinion of, we are joined online by Mr. Humayun Khan, who is expert in international affairs. Humayun Khan, welcome to the program. So of course, when we talk about these important resolutions, what's your take on this, that how these are going to complement Pakistan's existing framework on arms control and disarmament and also the CBMs in the region?
Thank you, Mariam. I guess cue from where Dr. Jaspal was just mentioning something about the atmosphere which is now existing in the world, where the bigger powers, the powers which means something in terms of real politics, are depending less on less in terms of these international treaties, and then they're focusing on something which is not very helpful for a peaceful region, sub-region, or for that matter, the global world. However, if we see what you have just mentioned in your introduction, that Pakistan passed, or Pakistani recommended 4 resolutions were passed, that's also a very encouraging thing. And for the first time, Pakistan has been annually representing or presenting these 4 disarmament-related resolutions to the United Nations General Assembly's Committee. Last year, overwhelming majority agreed to what Pakistan suggested. And the fourth resolution is also very important because it talks about international security assistance for non-nuclear weapon states from nuclear weapon states. So that's also something which I know Dr. Jaspal is an expert and he will also say something about it. But considering Pakistani arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation efforts, Pakistan these efforts as a vital tool to promote global peace and security, not only at the global level but also at the regional level. Pakistan has always advocated the need for an inclusive form of deliberation and negotiation. Basically, that should take into the
Right, of
account
course. And Dr. Jaspal,
all
in
the
your
states within the
opinion,
region.
what message does it send to the international community when we talk about consensus on these 3 important resolutions? And of course, in the 4th resolution, one what was against?
Well, I think the message is very clear that the civilized nation, especially including Pakistan, they desire arms control, disarmament, and save the world from the wars. Pakistan has already proposed since 1998 what we call it nuclear restraint regime in the region. Of course, India is not agreeing. If you can focus on these resolutions, the spirit is to prevent the what you call it arms race and save the money for addressing infectious diseases and for the others. So in this context, the clear message is, because we were the proposer and part of these kind of the activities, that Pakistan is interested in the peace, stability in the region rather than arms race, which has always ended up into a war. And secondly is that the confidence of building measures is imperative between the strategic rivals or strategic competitors, and that can only save the world from the scourge of the war. And the final message, I think, the message is that the humanity requires peace instead of arms race ending or entailing towards the war.
Right. And Mr. Shejar, in your opinion, how Pakistan is going to engage with the neighboring countries and other stakeholders to implement these resolutions, and what challenges could emerge as a result of these?
So, Mariam, these resolutions already have been passed with overwhelming majority. Only one country has basically voted against.
Right, but
the
implementation
resolution
remains a question.
So these resolutions will now go into the UN General Assembly for approval, and after they're approved, they would be ratified by the General Assembly. And what we can basically now do after that is all the regional countries can come together and develop these mechanisms, because a lot of mechanisms for regional connectivity and regional cooperation are already there, and we can use those mechanisms to develop mechanisms for confidence building measures, which can form forums in which regional frictions can be talked about, and solutions can be developed through bilateral exchange or even at multilateral forums as well. And that should be the next step in this whole overall scheme of things.
Of course, that is very important when we talk about these important resolutions passed by UNGA. And now we will be moving towards the upcoming COP28 summit that is to be held in Dubai from 30th November to 12th December. Mr. Humayun, when we talk about this upcoming COP28, in your opinion, what is a significant agenda that Pakistan would be pushing towards?
I'll just briefly comment on the last question and then move on to this one. Even though that there are existing challenges to disarmament regime which are not addressed, but then some new challenges have emerged, and Pakistan believes that the cooperative, multilateral, and multilateralism is a way to approach. And this connects to your question that now 28. What Dr. Jaspal gave a message earlier, that there were 3 messages that the world do things on its own, and what we spend in terms of securing ourselves hypothetically these threats, the world is actually witnessing some other existential threat, and climate change is one of them. And if we collaborate, and if multilateralism is something which is being promoted, and with the passage of overwhelming majority supporting Pakistan resolution, the message is clear that we believe in arms control, we believe in confidence building. So within that context, COP28 is something which we can basically capitalize on COP27, where Pakistan, along with G77 and China, were able to convince the world that the global south is suffering and now the global north at the same time. And we need a fund which basically helped the majority of the underdeveloped global south, and that was losses and damage. 1 year has passed, losses and damages fund was announced, but there is very little progress on that.
Right, right.
Donors,
We
a
will
lot
be
of
talking
developing
about
countries
it.
who were
Mr.
supposed.
Shayar, can you tell us about some of the policy initiatives that the government has implemented in the recent times, or particularly in the past 1 year, to combat climate change?
So, Mariam, when it comes to COP28 and the discussions that are taking place before the event is supposed to be held, it's like focusing more on Pakistan's efforts in getting the agreement on the establishment of the loss and damages fund. And this loss and damage fund was formed in COP27 in Egypt. Now there are like a lot of like international challenges, and most of the focus of Pakistan and developing countries would be on the operationalization of the loss and damage fund, and that is where all the developing countries is focusing towards. There have been a lot of negotiations up till now coming up to the conference, and there are like certain roadblocks that are there, and one of the biggest roadblock is climate finance and climate funding. A lot of policies that Pakistan and developing countries that have to formulate in inculcating sustainable development into their agenda, it requires a lot of like funding, and this funding cannot be in the form of loans because developing countries are already under a lot of debt burden. Developed countries or countries which are considered wealthy, they are the ones who have to fund this loss and damage fund, and the developing countries will be able to access those funds in the form of grants rather than loans. Up till now, since COP27 has concluded, a lot of negotiations have gone through on how to basically fund this, the loss and damage fund. And countries like the UK, European Union, the US, we've observed that they've been very reluctant on putting these funds in, and this fund generally per year requires $100 billion of commitment.
Right, of course, we will be talking about that. But Mr. Humayun, when we talk about this important summit coming up, what should be the agenda that Pakistan should be putting forward leading to the conference?
I think the agenda is very clear. What Shahyar was mentioning, I guess we will be representing not only the global south, but also the biggest example is Pakistan itself. We are one of the top 10 countries who have been sufferer of the climate change, man-made or God-sent, in whatever capacity. And our contribution to change is minimum. Participation is less than 1%. So now the message is we need to bring this divide as little as possible. The global south has to catch up. Population is increasing. There are measures which Pakistan has to take internally, but since this is such a huge, magnanimous task, one country alone cannot do that. We need transfer of technology. We need what the West has achieved so far in terms of using resources, and at the same time we need those special drawing rights for International Monetary Institution. We need also global south, where we have huge amounts of debt accumulated. So I guess the global north will come together, where they'll have to see which country has suffered more because of the climate change, and how their economic system, how their technology, how their resources are being utilized. So there has to be a very comprehensive approach. So in
Right.
terms of that, I guess the losses and damages fund has to be very active. And then also, there's just one last thing I need to say. I guess the global north get more resources now, and time is because last we were given around 10 billion assurances, but up till now the money has not come. So whenever you promise, you have to walk the talk at the same time.
Of course, and talking about this important loss and damage fund, how do you think Pakistan is going to be collaborating with other countries as well as international organizations to build momentum for COP28?
I think the first thing is to sensitize the international organization, though they are already aware about the agenda of the Conference on Parties, COP28. But the problem is that we are trying to sensitize because we are suffering. We are suffering because of the developed world's crimes that has created the pollution, climate change, or these kind of things. So in 2015, 1.5 degrees centigrade they have to decrease, but nothing is happening. Everything is absence. And Pakistan is very much determined to do this because we last year also suffered a lot because of the floods and these kind of things, and our agriculture is very much affected. Now on the other side, if you see that since I read that in Delhi the schools have been closed because of the smog. Similarly, we are facing the smog crisis in Lahore. So Pakistan is very much in a need that in the neighborhood and at the same time of the international community much focus on it. Otherwise, these damages will be going to affect the human rights of the people as well. Similarly, if you see, the China is the only country which cut 51% of the carbon, but the other states are not working on it, and that is the need. That when we go to the UAE, we can make them realize, and the most important thing is that they must release the promised fund. Now what happened that if there is a natural calamity because of the environmental change, the developed states or the participants always go and support and develop the fund for it, but then there is no budget release. So there is a need to release of that budget immediately so that the people who have suffered last year in Pakistan, they can receive some kind of a recipe.
Right, and Dr. Isbal, can you tell us about the key metrics that will be used in global stock take when we talk about climate mitigation?
I think that generally is that everyone is there talking about the what you call it positive arrangements of this kind of the meetings, but practically we find that there is no tangible or substantial outcome. So in this context, obviously Pakistan and other like-minded states are going to emphasize that COP has at least some kind of the tangible outcome, and there will be some cut or some climate improvement, but unfortunately nothing is happening on that in that context.
Right. Mr. Humayun, can you tell us about some of the sectors in which Pakistan has made significant progress when we talk about global stock take?
I think I would agree with Dr. Jaspal that there has been a lot of talk, but less has been done. But Pakistan, as I've already told you, Pakistan is the least country in terms of putting carbon emission into the world. Our carbon footprint is less than 1%. Our energy mix is still one of the best in terms of producing clean energy. But yes, we have a lot of policy initiative when it comes to population control, comes to the governance model that we have been adopted in terms of migration from rural areas to urban areas. Urban development and planning has been not at par with the existing rules and regulation. But again, a country with 240 million population, and not only this one particular calamity that we're talking about, climate change, Pakistan has been unfortunately suffering from the global geopolitics as well. We have Afghanistan on one side, which has been suffering so many years from war and famine and many other things,
right.
And we have to also help as well in terms of refugees. It's something which one country cannot alone do it. We have to set our house in order, but we need international community to come and follow the promises they have made to help Pakistan in terms of its mitigation, in terms of its resilience, in terms of new technology, in terms of helping Pakistan out of it.
And Mr. Shijar, in your opinion, what challenges or opportunities Pakistan anticipate in global stocktake process, and how Pakistan is going to address those challenges?
So Mariam, right now the core focus should be to get the international community to realize their financial obligations when it comes to the operationalization of the loss and damage fund. Right now there are like a lot of pre-conference negotiations taking place behind closed doors, and there are discussions on what the text of the resolution that has to come out of COP28, what that should be. And a lot of analysts are basically saying that the language is very dilute. Dilute in the sense that developed countries or countries that are wealthy, they're not ready to commit openly, and they want this whole resolution to use words such as the countries should voluntarily contribute to the fund. They're also using words as countries can be urged, or countries can be convinced on fulfilling their obligations. Now these obligations are not only financial, they're also historical as well. And as Humayun Sahab and Dr. Jaspal have basically said, that this crisis relating to climate change, it didn't happen in the last like 5 years. It basically took decades of emission of global greenhouse gases from the developed countries. They rapidly industrialized, and most of the damage to the climate and environment was caused by the global north. Right now, it is a bit disappointing to see that the global north is not coming forward as they should have to basically develop this fund, and they want all other countries to contribute as well.
Right, and Dr. Jaspal, that is the reason maybe that there are calls for comprehensive transformation of international financial institutions. What's your take on that, and how that is going to help the climate cause?
I think that the transformation in the international institutions will be definitely going to help the climate if they are sincere, in that they try to change their policy of the investment of in the fossil fuels or carbon kind of secure energy products. If they change and they assist the developing states or invest in the sectors like renewable resources, like even including the nuclear energy or these kind of the solar energy, definitely there will be lesser impact on the environment. But I'm not seeing any kind of a thing. Yes, rhetoric is there more, but practice is lesser.
Right, of course, and we are concluding this segment here. Thank you very much, Mr. Humayun Khan, for joining us in the program. And now we will be talking about the recent situation and the crisis when we talk about the Palestine conflict. Of course, the death toll is rising each hour, and currently when we talk, the death toll is above 9,000. And of course, thousands of protesters around the world are on streets to raise voice for the Palestine cause. We will be talking about this and what is going to be unfolding and what are its implications for Middle East. Dr. Jaspal, let me start with you. Can you tell us about the recent humanitarian crisis and of course the civilian deaths in the Israeli aggression?
Maria, frankly speaking, the world conscious, or especially the Western government's conscious, seems dead. The people are protesting, they are reminding them what is happening in Gaza. It's a genocide, the Israelis' atrocities. They are not sparing even the innocent children, innocent women and the people. They are bombing, they are trying to, you can say, miserably destroy that, and there is no reason for this madness. And the madness has been so much increased that 2-3 days back, the heritage minister of or cabinet member of the Netanyahu said that we are going, or there must be use of atomic devices in the Gaza. If this kind of the madness, what they are thinking and why the world is not speaking. Yes, you rightly pointed out in the beginning that the people everywhere in the world, including Pakistan, they are demonstrating, but the government seems silent over. But gradually the momentum is taking. A few governments have asked their ambassadors to move out of the Israel. But if Israelis are listening, Israelis can only listen if the Americans change their mind. I mean the Biden administration, not the American people, because the American people are already demanding that this genocide must be stopped.
Right, but President Biden has also recently said that they are trying, US is trying to go for a humanitarian truce. What's your take on the recent efforts for de-escalation and diplomacy when we talk about the ceasefire of the
we have to make a distinction between, by what my understanding is that when the President Biden said humanitarian truce, he's just asking that the humanitarian medicines, food, supply chain shall not be disturbed, or there shall be some vacuum in or stoppage in the firing, and that will go. But the ultimate object, you can say, is the possibility is ceasefire and then aiming to two-state solution. Otherwise, this war will continue. Israel seems determined to destroy the entire 2.2 million plus population of the Gaza, capture this territory because of its geostrategic, geoeconomic significance, and they are not paying attention to what the war crimes. They think that these war crimes which they are committing, they have no value, and in this context, unfortunately, the Western powers are supportive to them.
Right, and are there some conditions put forth by either side when we talk about ceasefire agreement?
So right now there are no negotiations taking place. There is
And what
only
are
one
the reasons?
demand.
Because there have been ceasefires in the past. So what is different this time?
So Mariam, I basically see it from a very multi-pronged angle, this whole conflict. I also see this as Israel's opportunity to basically clear out the whole region of Gaza. And they have been trying to convince the Egyptian government to give access to the Sinai desert, in which they are basically saying that we can allow the citizens of Gaza, like around over like almost 2 million of them, to relocate to that area. And the regional players, especially Jordan, Egypt, Lebanon, they're very reluctant in any sort of like arrangement of this sort, because even like before, a lot of like refugees that have basically moved out from that area, they were not allowed to return from Israel, and they want to like take over that geographical location as well. And they don't want this like security threat looming for them in the future. So they're not ready to negotiate. The only call that have come from them is they want unconditional surrender of Hamas. And in this like unconditional surrender, they don't care whether they're like killing civilians. Right now, in every 10 minutes, one child in Palestine is dying.
Of course, and what are the key factors that have led to escalation of a crisis between Israel and Lebanon?
So, Mariam, this crisis did not like start, a few weeks ago. Hezbollah obviously is like also calling for a ceasefire. All the regional countries are basically saying that if such incidents should not be repeated, then we have to like move towards a two-state solution. Two-state solution from the perspective of Israel is not practical for them. This is like them conceding territory which they think is their own. They are foregoing international law. They don't like care about any humanitarian aid as well. And this is a policy of collective punishment. So they basically say as long as the people of Palestine, the civilians of Palestine are hosting, they say they're hosting Hamas as a terrorist organization, then attacking the civilian population is also legal according to their perception. And they have like not stopped even bombing hospitals. In the last like 2 weeks, they have bombed over 3 hospitals floors and killed civilians. Ambulances have been attacked by them. Even though there are like calls of humanitarian aid and to open the borders as well, there are like reports coming in that they have also killed civilians who were crossing the border.
Of course, and do you think that there are implications of this crisis, or do you see this crisis spilling over to the neighboring region, and what would be the consequences of this prolonged conflict for the Middle East?
I think that the crisis has been already spilled. Israel has been facing resistance from the Hezbollah side. Israel, in a frustration to engage Syria in a war, it is attacking on Syria, though the Syrians are refraining. But at the same time, Hamas is there. Houthis are also attacking on Israel. What the calculation was that after air bombing, Israel will be going for a ground raid and then capture the entire Gaza Strip. But in the last, what we call it, if you can just see, almost month is approaching, Israel is not able to capture a few inches of the Gaza. The tanks entered, the American support is there. Despite that, there's a strong guerrilla warfare is going on as the resistance is there. Civilians are dying, and at the same time, and this brutality, of course, Israel has adopted a brutal tactics, but these brutal tactics are not, or are failing to, you can say, accomplish any kind of the dividends in this war. So spillover is there, and spillover we have started seeing it. That in the Muslim world, or especially in the Middle East, these organizations like Al-Qaeda, or they were losing their voice, they were losing their recruits. But now with this kind of brutality, they are strengthening the narrative, they are strengthening their recruitment.
And looking forward, Dr. Dispal, what steps should be taken by the international community to mitigate the crisis?
Immediately ceasefire. That is the answer. Every sensible person, every sensible non-official Western individual, why I'm saying non-official, because official policy is different, they are demanding immediate ceasefire. They are demanding immediate negotiation. Russians and the Chinese in the United Nations Security Council, they have said they ceasefire immediate and then follow up subsequently, you have to establish 2 states for a permanent peace. My understanding is that this crisis will be having a lasting impact on the region and in this neighborhood.
Of course, and what's your take on this? That what steps should be taken by United States as well as by the international community to mitigate this crisis?
So it's now a collective responsibility of the Western countries led by the US to basically broker a ceasefire first and then go towards a more viable solution, a long-term solution, which obviously comes up to a two-state solution. Without that, peace in the region is like not possible. And this like whole conflict will have like a lot of like serious repercussions for the future as well, even for Israel and for the regional countries as well. As long as the international community doesn't come together, and just like calling for a ceasefire and just for calling for resolutions to pass will not like provide any solution to this problem. For that, multilateral or like regional mechanisms have to be there, and Israel has to be pushed to become a responsible, state in the region and to abide by international law. As other than that, humanitarian aid needs to go to the people as soon as possible.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Shehjar Khan, for joining us in today's program. Thank you very much, Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, for joining us in today's program. Of course, this is significant for the world to act now to stop Israeli aggression. And of course, previously in the program, we talked about COP28. This is very important for the world to act towards sustainable development and, of course, to hear the voice of the developing countries that are suffering from the impacts of this climate change. And of course, we talked about the important resolutions that Pakistan presented and that were adopted by consensus by UNGA. These are important for regional peace and security and as well as for world's peace and security. That's all from our side. Take care. Allah Hafiz.